Hi there, gorgeous! Hope you're having a fabulous day. In today's video, I'm bringing you a complete beginner's guide to everything eyeshadow application. Now, whether you are a brand new beginner, you've never done eyeshadow, you just want to get better, or you're a seasoned pro and you just want to hang out with me, I just thank you so much for taking the time to watch and for being here. I get asked a lot about eyeshadow, and I do feel like it's one of the few things that I could call myself an expert on because I've had so many years experience doing it. And so I wanted to share all of my tips and tricks and the helpful things that I learned through trial and error on my own in the past that have given me the results that I get today. And so I will also be doing timestamps on this video below for you in the description box in the event that you want to hop around and you want to look at different topics throughout the video. All those will be referenced for you below. At any rate, I hope that you find this helpful. It is currently raining, so I hope you will enjoy because I am loving this weather right now. So the first thing that you want to do when you're doing your eyeshadow application is always moisturize your eyes. I notice such a huge difference if I don't take the time to add a moisturizer both on the eyelid and underneath the eyes. The eyeshadow application is much different, and you may have noticed that yourself if you have ever skipped that step. So the one that I'm using today is from the Hada Labo brand. This is an excellent ice cream. It's an eye cream, not an ice cream. Ice cream sounds good right now. I do have an entire video I did not too long ago of a bunch of different eye creams that I reviewed, all under $20 that are excellent. This is one of them, and they do an absolute wonderful job. So I do apply it underneath the eyes and also on the eyelid. It goes without saying that if you're building a house, you want a really strong foundation. And the same is true when it comes to makeup. If your base isn't good, anything that you put on top of it isn't going to look that great. And that's why moisturizing the skin is so important, both under your face makeup and your eye makeup. Usually I'll let that sink into my skin and take about maybe 3 minutes or so to fully dry before applying my eyeshadow primers. So while I'm waiting on that, I'll share with you the eyeshadow primers that I use and that I love. Number one, Milani's eyeshadow primer. I need to get a new one. This is great if you have oily eyelids. One of my other favorites is from NYX. They make one called Proof It, which is one that will last for 24 plus hours. It is excellent. Profusion also makes one called No Budge. That is outstanding. Very affordable price points with all of these also. Lately I've been using one from Alter Ego Cosmetics simply because they've been sending it to me for free, and it's a great product. It's a little higher in price compared to the ones I just shared with you, but they all work equally great. It doesn't matter how much you apply. I mean, you don't want to glop it on or anything, but just apply enough and then blend it in. One of the biggest things that you want to do when it comes to your eyeshadow primer is to allow it to fully dry. And I learned this the hard way. When I first started out, I would apply the primer, immediately apply the eyeshadow, and then I would end up with all kinds of problems. And you do want to make sure that the eyeshadow primer is fully dry. If you don't, you can end up with creasing. It can be hard to blend. You'll notice a lot of unevenness in your application. And one of the best ways to ensure professional results when it comes to eyeshadow application is to apply a blending shade after your eyeshadow primer has fully set. So I have been using up some of my old MAC Blanc Type eyeshadows, and this is a simple matte shade that matches my skin tone perfectly. Wet n Wild's Creme Brulee is another one that I also favor. So you want to find a shade that matches your skin tone perfectly. In the event that you cannot find one, you can also use a translucent powder. It works the same way. And the way that you do this is you simply apply it onto the brow bone and bring it down into the crease a little bit. And what this does is it primes the skin and it creates a smooth surface for the eyeshadow to glide onto. So if you were to skip this step, you can end up with unevenness. The eyeshadows can blend more harshly, and it makes the process a little harder. And that's why I always recommend applying something like this on the brow bone first. Plus it cancels out all those nasty veins that I don't like to look at. Whew. I often get asked about brushes. Which brushes are you using? Which ones do you recommend? So I will give you a little general overview here of my top favorite brushes that I use pretty much consistently for all of my looks. And there are really only 5. but I'm going to give you some alternatives too for each of the 5 brushes that I'm showing you. Let's first talk about the blending brush that I use. This is from IT Cosmetics. It's the Heavenly Luxe No Tug Dual Eyeshadow Brush. It's their number 5 brush, and I love the end of this brush for blending specifically because it is densely packed and it's fluffy. And you can see when I say densely packed, I mean that the bristles are tight together. So there's not a lot of movement in the brush. You can see there, as opposed to, let's say, a brush like this one. By comparison, this one has a lot of movement. It's a little more loose of a brush. Right? This is much more tightly packed. And when it's tightly packed like this, it makes it a lot easier to blend out crease colors, to blend out harsh edges. It makes for a better experience overall. I don't have another one that I use. This is the one that I have been using for a good 2 or 3 years now, and it's my go-to favorite, and I would highly recommend it. The next one that I love, and I've been using also for a number of years, if not, I think I've been using it for the past 9 years, that is the MAC 239 brush. And what I love about this is that it's a flat shader brush. It's excellent for picking up a wide variety of mediums, shimmers especially. It holds on really well to the eyeshadows and gets them from the pan to your eyes with very minimal fallout. And that's why I love this brush so much. I have several of them. Now, if you don't want to go out and spend money on the MAC brush, you can also find an exact dupe for it in crown brushes. I have 2 of the crown brushes, and they are C510. And you can see up close the dupe that they are to the MAC brush. This is the MAC brush over here. Extremely close, and I use all 3 of these interchangeably between one another, and I love them. They are excellent for applying eyeshadow directly onto the lid. For applying eyeshadow into the crease, I go between one of these 3 brushes on a routine basis. So the first one I'll show you here, the pink and black one, is the Sedona Lace EB15. The second one is from AOA Studio. This is the E129. The third one is from Sedona Lace, I believe. No, Sigma E45. And you'll notice that between all 3 of these brushes, they have a fluffy tip, but it's also a tapered tip. And it's a smaller brush too, as opposed to a much bigger brush. Now, if you have bigger eyes, then you can go with a little bit of a bigger tip compared to this. I have a little bit smaller eyes, and so I find that these fit really well into the crease. Now, the AOA Studio brush that I'm showing you here, I'm also going to be showing you another one shortly. These came from a 10-piece brush set. It was $10 for the entire set, so you're getting more brushes than just this one and the other one, but it's worth it for $10. And these are of excellent quality. They are super soft, and I absolutely love these. For outer V work and more tightly packed areas, I will use either one of these 3 brushes. First one being the Sigma E25. And what I love about the shape of these brushes is that they have a densely packed, fine tip to them. The second one is the AOA Studio E128. You can see very similar design to the Sigma E25, much cheaper by comparison, great quality. And the third one is from Crown Brushes, and this is the C511, and that is a dupe also for the Sigma E25 that I use. So very similar shape between all 3 of these, and they make getting into tight areas a breeze. And the final brush that I use mainly for applying eyeshadow as eyeliner or doing winged eyeliner is the MAC 263. You can also use this one for your brows. It has an incredibly fine tip. You can see it there. It creates very sharp, precise lines, and it's a go-to favorite of mine. I have a few of these because they are that great. The eyeshadow palette I'll be using to apply my look today is one of my favorites, so that's why I'm choosing to go with it. That's the Viseart Neutral Matte Palette. You can see it's very well loved. So we'll walk through this step by step. I'll show you everything up close, and I'm going to try to edit it as little as possible so you can see everything that I'm doing. So the first brush that I'm going to use is this one from Sedona Lace. It's the EB15, and I'll take this shade from the palette, which is my most favorite cool toned neutral, and I'll go ahead and apply this into the crease. Now, you don't need much pressure. You really want to rely more on your wrist to move the brush around and just do small circular motions until you get a nice wash of color into the crease. Now, I often get asked about placement. Like, you'll see me often, I'm sure, do my crease first, or I'll do my lid first and then crease second. And people ask me often, is there a reason why you do that? And there is. Sometimes there isn't, but most of the time there's a method to the madness. And usually when I am wearing a really shimmery, glittery eyeshadow on the lid, I will apply it last. Because if you apply something like that first, let's say I applied a shimmery, glittery shade on the lid right there, and I went in to apply my crease color afterwards. By the time you're doing all this, you're brushing away a good portion of that lid color, and then you have to go back and reapply it, which is not a big deal, but it just makes it less work to go ahead and do the crease first and then save the lid for last. And so that's why sometimes you'll see me working crease, outer corner, outer V, and then apply my lid shade. The other thing that I would highly recommend doing, if you have hooded eyes especially, is to bring the eyeshadow up higher in the middle of the lid. So you can see that I always tend to bring mine up a little bit higher, right above the pupil. And not only does this help to open up the eyes because it extends your eye shape, but when you have hooded eyes, when the eye is open, you don't have that lid. So you wouldn't see this lid on someone with a hooded eye. And so you would see the eyeshadow there, and not only are you bringing it up higher so you can see it when the eye is open, but when you bring it up into the middle a little bit higher, it creates some lift there and it looks really nice. It's also a really good technique to use on aging eyes. If you find that you feel like your eyes are drooping, or you want the look of a facelift without surgery, it's another great little optical illusion that you can keep in your back pocket. And don't be afraid to layer. I layer more often than not with eyeshadow, and I find that it's a lot easier to add than it is to subtract. So take a small amount at a time and build it from there. Blending is an art in itself. It just takes practice. That's all I can really tell you. There's no real surefire method to get it instantly overnight. You might, and kudos to you if you do, but if you don't, just realize that it's a process, and it took me a while to learn it too, so you're not alone. What I will usually do is just take the brush that I started out with. So when you apply that blending shade in the beginning, there's going to be some residual left over in your brush. So I'm not putting anything extra on the brush at this point. I'm simply taking that brush and going over the edges of that crease color, and simple back and forth motion like this. And I will say that the brush that you're using to do this will make all the difference in the world. You do want to make sure you have a densely packed brush like this, and it really does make a world of difference. That's what I've noticed. And that's probably the best advice I can give you when it comes to blending, is get the right brush. Because if you're using the wrong brush, you're going to get frustrated. You're not going to see the results that you want. That's my opinion anyway. Now, what I will also tell you is that sometimes I'll blend away too much, because I'm a little bit of an overachiever like that. But it's okay, because what you can do is go back with a tiny bit more of your eyeshadow. And I did it on this eye so you can see what I'm doing here, and go back over it a little bit. And this may take you a while also to figure out. You have to understand your own unique sweet spot, if you will, of where it looks best. And minimal pressure again. Sometimes I have to do some back and forth like that to get the exact blend I'm looking for. So don't be afraid to add a little bit, blend, add a little bit more, blend. It's just going to be trial and error until you figure out what works best for you. But I typically do not go back and add more of my blending shade for this step. If I use more of the blending shade, it will be a little bit later when I show you how to clean up the edges of the outer V. But at this point, it's just using what's already on the brush. Taking the Crown C510 brush, I am going to use the white eyeshadow from the palette, and I will apply that directly onto the inner half of the lid. You can see why I love these flat brushes. They are amazing for putting the color on. You don't need to pick up much with the brush. It's a great, great brush. I love these. And this is a very simplistic look, by the way. I'm not showing you anything too complex here today, and don't get overwhelmed with what I'm doing. If you want to keep this really simple, you can stop here. I mean, just take this shade all the way to the end, or any other shade that you want. You don't have to use white. You can use the same color from the crease. You can use a little bit of a darker brown. It's completely up to you, but just stick with 2 colors. If this is your first time doing eyeshadow, make it easier on yourself, because I'm going to be using 4, which can sometimes be a little overwhelming, especially when you're first starting out. And when I did first start out, I did use a lot of 2 color eyeshadow combinations until I did get comfortable. So just a little bit more info there to help ease you in, so you're not feeling like, oh my gosh, because I don't want you to get overwhelmed with this process. It's so easy to talk yourself out of it and to negative talk yourself. Just realize that you're learning and you just need patience. And for the next step in this look, I am taking the deep brown from the palette, same brush, and you really don't need much of this because it's so pigmented. And I will apply that to the outer third of the lid. So it's only this little part out here where I am tapping the eyeshadow on. And then when you get to the point where you want to blend the inner color into that outer third, you can wipe your brush. I usually keep a paper towel on my desk, so you can see that my paper towel is here, where I wipe the brushes off quite often. And I will wipe off the excess and then go back and tap between those 2 shades. You don't need much pressure here either. And you do that light enough to where you get a gradient fade. And those are your results. For the outer V, I am going to be using the AOA Studio E128 brush. And I'm taking a little bit of the dark brown from this palette. Now the outer V is an area of the eye that will require a lot of practice. This is an area that I didn't quite master until I want to say maybe even like 5 years ago is when I feel like I finally did master it, but it takes a lot of practice. So again, be patient with yourself and understand that. So the way that I typically do this is I'll take a little bit on the tips of the bristles, and that's probably a little bit too much, so I will wipe off some of it there on my paper towel. And then you go directly into, if you feel with your finger on the outer corner of your eye, you can feel the orbital bone and you'll feel a dip. I know this is so like, ugh. But it is the only way you can really find your outer V. You'll feel a dip from that bone down into the corner of your eye. Now that is where your outer V is. So that's where you want to focus the application with your brush. And so I'll usually start there and begin to do small circles and work the eyeshadow up and out until I form that V shape. And you don't want much on the brush because it is so easy to apply too much here and then end up with a mess that you have to clean up. And yeah, just trial and error, take it from somebody who's been there. Less is more. It's a lot easier to work with this small amount than a bigger amount. And so that's pretty much it, what you're seeing right there. And you'll see I have a pretty good shape formed in the outer V. And then what I will usually do, let's say I slipped outside the outer V. Let's say that this line went out further than what I wanted for it to. You can clean that up very easily. I don't feel like there's a need to use tape. Some people will use tape to keep the eyeshadow in line there, but I feel like that creates more lines and it just doesn't look as professional, in my opinion, of course. One thing you can do is you can take your blending shade again with your blending brush, and you can sweep it along the outer edge there, and that will help to clean up any stray edges and diffuse harsh lines. And I will do this also even when I haven't slipped outside the outer V to give the look a more polished appearance And there you go. Applying eyeshadow into the outer V is a personal choice, I mean, obviously, but there are certain eye shapes that really benefit from this type of placement. Most notably downturned eyes, which is what I have. You'll notice that on the outer corners, my eyes droop, and when I apply eyeshadow into the outer V, it helps to create lift in my eyes, and the same can be true for hooded eyes also. You'll notice that sometimes with hooded eyes, there is a droop on the outer corners, and putting eyeshadow into the outer V can also help to create a lift and make your eyes appear elongated. So it is a really nice technique to try to master if you want to create that kind of look. To complete the look that I'm showing you here, I'm going to be applying eyeshadow as eyeliner, but I did want to briefly talk about the different kinds of eyeliners that you can use to complete your looks. First one being liquid. Very well-known medium. It's been around for decades. And I will tell you that my most favorite that I've been using recently, and I would highly recommend it, is from the Jason Wu Beauty line. This is the classic liquid eyeliner. It is a matte, black, stay put, will not budge all day, drugstore priced liquid eyeliner that is absolutely fabulous. Gel eyeliner is also another great medium. It can be a little, you need a little bit of practice to really nail it. At least that was the case in my experience with it. But when you do learn how to apply it and you get really good at it, there's so many things that you can do with it. And I highly recommend looking at Inglot's gel eyeliner line. They have so many colors to choose from. It is amazing. Best part is if they dry out on you, which they more than likely will at some point. I mean, come on, it's a gel eyeliner. You simply take the Inglot mixing medium that they sell separately, mix it in, it brings the gel eyeliner right back to life, and you can continue using it just like that. So absolutely love those. You can also use pencil eyeliner. Not my favorite from the standpoint of it being a little more difficult to apply. It can look uneven on the eyes, but it's going to be up to you from a personal preference point of view. The great thing about pencil eyeliner is that it is readily accessible. It's a little easier to apply than, say, a gel or a liquid, and it is a little easier to correct mistakes with it also. By far my most favorite method of eyeliner application would have to be eyeshadow, because it is so easy to correct if you do make a mistake, and if you do make a mistake, it's not that easy to see the mistake as would be with a liquid eyeliner, which basically is a huge tattletale. So I will usually use a deep brown or a deep black to line my eyes, and so I'm going in with the deep brown from this palette. I'm using the MAC 263 angled brush. Everyone has their own method of applying eyeliner. What I will usually do is tap it on a little bit at a time, simply because I blink a lot. And I always find that if I don't take time to pause or apply a little bit at a time, that is when I make my mistakes, is when I blink. And you can keep the line sharp, like I've done there, or you can take a brush like the Sigma E30. This is a very fine-tipped but incredibly soft pencil brush, and you can go over the edges of where you applied that eyeshadow. And this is one of the reasons also why I like eyeshadow, is because you can smudge it. It can look very slept in. It can look smoky. And so there's the difference. It's very subtle, but it's a really beautiful effect when you take the time to smoke it out a little bit. You can also apply eyeshadow on the lower lash line. I will sometimes do that with looks. I'll take the same MAC 263 angled brush in the same way I applied it on the upper lash line, and I will simply swipe it on the lower lash line like so. Now, if you focus the eyeshadow to the outer half of your lower lash line, it will make your eyes appear bigger. So in other words, if you were to take this liner and go all the way into the inner tear duct, it can close your eyes off and make them look smaller. But when you keep it to the outer half, it has the opposite effect. The same is true of the upper lash line, by the way. If you did not want to go all the way into the inner corner, there's nothing saying that you have to. You can actually start about right there on the eye and then go out, and that can also help to elongate and open up the eyes. Another one of the questions I get asked quite often is, why do you do your eyes first and not your face first? I was always taught to do my eyes first for the most polished looking appearance, because when you're applying your eyeshadow, sometimes you can get fallout from the eyeshadow on the under eye of your face, and it can make cleanup a lot harder if you've already done your face. And so that's why applying the eyes first will give you that more professional, polished appearance in the end. I learned everything that I'm showing you here today through trial and error, through mistakes. I made so many mistakes. And if it's one piece of advice I can give you right here, right now, is that make mistakes. Go out and make as many mistakes as you can, because the more mistakes that you make, the better you're going to get. And hold on to that, because there's beauty in that. And I truly hope that you will enjoy the learning experience that comes with it. And if you would like a complete beginner's guide also on false eyelash application, very similar to the way that this video was presented today, I will have that video linked for you below in the description box. Thank you for being here, for taking the time to watch. And if you have other suggestions in the future for videos like this, feel free to share them below. I enjoyed this, and I look forward to more. Have a beautifully blessed day ahead.